So thank you all for being here today. And like I said, this topic is very dear to me, but it's the elephant in the room. And it's the concept that a lot of people don't want to talk about stress and how it affects your relationships and productivity and health. And I always use this hashtag asking for a friend because a lot of times in my talks, someone will raise their hand. They're like, this isn't my problem, but I'm asking for a friend because financial stress is so stigmatized these days, even though everyone's going through it. And so I kind of say that a little tongue in cheek. I'm asking for a friend a lot of times. So Libby did a great job of giving you background on me. I do have offices around the Bay Area, and we have 5 attorneys with my firm who work on all kinds of financial stress issues. But the real star of the show is Bernadette. And Bernadette is the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room, let's start there, is that 70% of Americans have a debt or credit problem of some sort. 70%. So I tell people, whenever you walk in a room, picture that 2/3 of the people in there, more than 2/3, have some sort of financial problem that they're not willing to talk about. They don't want anyone else to know. They think they're alone. They think that no one else is possibly struggling with this, and it's so embarrassing. So I always tell people to imagine this elephant wherever you go, and people everywhere have the same problem. The issue a lot of times with debt and credit is we don't realize how bad it's gotten until it's almost too late. And so my platform is based on educating people on how financial stress really affects you so that you can understand what it does to productivity, to relationships, to your health, and know that there are options out there. If you do get yourself into financial difficulty, there are all kinds of options and things you can do. My favorite thing when a client comes into my office is when I see them realize, or on Zoom these days, as it may be, is when they realize we start talking and they're like, wait, there are things I can do about this that don't involve, life altering decisions. And so I like that feeling once a client realizes that. So Bernadette is my elephant. She's a real elephant. She's had headshots done with my book when that came out a few years ago. And she makes a hard topic a little bit more approachable, I guess I will say. So, and I always tell people the room is full of elephants. You would be shocked in any room that you walk into, the people in there who are struggling, who you would have no idea. And a few years ago, my main office is in San Ramon, which is a fairly affluent area of the Bay. There's, it's thought of as a nice place to live, good schools, that kind of thing. And someone asked me, why do you have an office in San Ramon? No one there is struggling. No one possibly could need you. And I told them that most of my clients come from Blackhawk in San Ramon because
Wow.
a lot of the people that are living a lifestyle where they have a $4 million house and driving 2 Mercedes and that kind of thing often are leveraging debt to do that. Sometimes it's a good leverage and sometimes it gets in over their head. Back in 2015 and 2016, the big thing was all of these adjustable rate mortgages that were 10-year ARMs that were issued back in 2006 when the market was hot, all started coming due. And so I had tons of clients that we were trying to get them out of these horrible loans and onto something else. But it was those types of clients who everyone thought was, high net worth and all these great things. And they were really struggling trying to keep up with what they had. So I always think that we would be surprised at who around you may have problems. So of course, the elephant in the room, debt. No one really wants to talk about debt. There's all kinds of jokes about good debt and bad debt and all kinds of things that people talk about, but no one really wants to talk about debt. However, money is the leading cause of stress. Even before COVID, money was the leading cause of stress. And so not talking about finances is a real problem, and we should start a lot younger talking about it. I talk about work and productivity a lot because people don't realize, business owners often don't realize the effect that financial stress has on their workplace productivity and our productivity in our personal lives as well. 80% of employees admit in a survey that they deal with their financial problems at work. 80%, and those are the ones who admit to it. And so what that looks like is, and it may not be something as drastic as bankruptcy, It may be they're applying for a mortgage and their mortgage underwriter has asked for their blood sample, their birth certificate for their first child, and something else crazy in order to get a mortgage. And they're rooting through all their documents trying to find that during work hours. So it may not be just, a financial stress, something critical, but it's something they're dealing with their credit and things like that. The Department of Labor did a study in 2010, so it's 12 years old now, and they found that the employer loses $7,000 a year per employee because of financial issues at work, because of the employee's personal financial issues. So spending the time and working on these different things and how it affects them. So I'm going to go through a few of those. It was $300 billion per year that employers are losing to their bottom line. 150 hours per employee per year. This breaks down to about 3 hours per week that employees are spending on their own personal financial issues while they're at work. Increase in workers' compensation premiums. So this was fascinating. I read a white paper on this topic of financial stress in the workplace, specifically back in 2018. And what I found through different case studies that I had read and a couple clients that I worked with, that workers' compensation premiums were elevated where the employees were financially stressed because they were having more accidents at work and they were distracted. And I have a specific example of this, of a manufacturing facility that was in Castro Valley, Hayward area. And they had an employee who operated a dangerous piece of equipment, and he was very specialized at what he did. And he got served with a notice that they were going to garnish 25% of his wages for a collection lawsuit that he had ignored and let go. And he has 6 kids. And so he stayed up like 3 nights in a row watching really bad late night television to try to, get these things off his mind. Went to work that 4th morning and had a horrible accident. And he never was able to work again. Workers' comp had to pay for it. But how I got involved was the business owner came to me and said, I can't afford to stay in business because of my workers' compensation premiums. And I was like, wait, what? What happened? What was the incident? And he explained all this to me. And we worked backwards to figure out how this accident actually happened. And no one had discovered this thing about the wages until I got involved and asked about it. So it's a big deal, and people don't realize how distracted you are and how much just the fatigue that comes over you with financial stress. I have another law review article that talks about lawyers and financial stress and student loans. And that was fascinating because it basically says that living with financial stress is the equivalent of missing a night's sleep every day. So it's a huge impact on your body and what's going on. Medical insurance premiums have also been known to cause a lot of financial stress and increase in the workplace. 70% of illnesses are attributed to stress. And so I always tell people that this is a disconnect. And the reason why I talk about this so often, and the reason why I present it to all kinds of different groups, because I want the word to get out there and figure out that there are options, and there's so many misconceptions out there. The biggest misconception I have is that people think the problem is financial literacy. And this could be employers, employees, it could be any relationship here. But the employees are actually in crisis. So it's basically telling people that are having their wages garnished or dealing with tax liens that you should budget better, and here's how you can contribute to your 401k. So all of these employers and organizations implement these financial literacy programs, which are fantastic if you get to someone before they're in trouble. But once someone's in trouble, giving them financial literacy programs is basically rubbing salt in their wounds that they can't even function at the level of financial literacy. And so in order to solve that problem, we have to go back and solve the crisis that's happening before we give them tools to never get in that situation again. So the buzzwords I always hear with financial literacy, the B word is not just bankruptcy, it's budgeting. I hate the term budgeting because everyone has such a negative connotation with it. Money management, financial education, wealth protection, which, no offense to the insurance people around, wealth protection is a thing, and financial advisors are great resources to use, but it often comes with trying to find investable assets instead of trying to help people out of a crisis. Financial wellness is probably my biggest pet peeve word ever, because financial wellness should be on getting people healthy and keeping them there, not just implementing programs that have this buzzword about them. So what are people actually dealing with? And this could be in the workplace, it could be anywhere. Wage garnishments are a big deal. 25% of wages in California can be taken from gross. Your gross wages can be taken from regular creditors. If it's the IRS, they leave you about $300 a week to live on when they start garnishing. 401k loans. So I had an employer a few years ago who wanted to help their employees. And the way they were helping them was they were allowing them to take 3 401k loans at a time. So what was happening was the employees were taking 3 401k loans, one would end, they'd come back saying, well, now I can't live because all these 401k loans are cycling out there. 401k loans are almost as bad as payday loans, as far as I'm concerned. People shouldn't be taking 401k loans. There are very specific reasons, but they should not be used as a piggy bank. And if someone's taking a 401k loan, it's probably a sign that they have other financial issues that should be discussed. Past due taxes. I have a lot of taxes. A lot of my past due tax issues are with either small business owners who got sick and can't keep up with installment agreements that they're on for previous years, or employees who claim themselves exempt and don't have taxes withheld year after year. It happens a lot. Student loans, $1.5 trillion. And what I'm seeing with student loans these days is a lot of issues with people not making enough money to even make a bare minimum payment. And we're doing a lot of total disability discharge in student loans for federal loans. So if you're 100% disabled, those are dischargeable. There are other cases that are coming out that are discharging them in bankruptcy now. And so those are also interesting to see, especially if someone is ill and we're trying to limit the debt load and financial stress for that person. Credit card lawsuits, those go along with wage garnishments. Those are pretty common. They were stopped for a while during COVID. Creditors weren't filing as many, but they are back in full force now. Foreclosures have started up again in the Bay Area. I have several that were scheduled this week that we were working on. Getting a mortgage, like I said, sitting at your desk trying to get all the documents and all the things you need in order to get a mortgage, and then figuring out whether you have enough income and if you can afford the payments. That affects that work too. And then identity theft. People don't think of that as, oh, that's not my problem, that's identity theft, that happened to me, but it's still a financial problem that you have to deal with when it happens to you. And so identity theft goes really hand in hand with debt and credit problems, because you're constantly having to try to figure out what financial information may be stolen. Health identity theft has also been a big deal these days, where someone goes in for some type of screening and they're like, oh, you've already had this, or oh, you were just in last week for a colonoscopy, but the person never was in because someone used their health insurance. Let's see, red flags or warning signs. I always tell people to look for 401k loan issues if they're in HR. For individuals, around Christmas time, I usually do a presentation when you're meeting with family members over the holidays, which hasn't been as popular the last couple of years because of COVID. But a lot of times, if you're meeting with someone and their phone is ringing off the hook with 800 numbers and you just see them hitting cancel, 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 or a lot of unopened mail at their house, this can be often a sign of some type of financial stress that they're not dealing with. Collection phone calls, internet activity at work. HR often will call me with some examples of these things and tell me what's going on with their employees and if they can help somehow. Okay, so moving on from some warning signs in work and going on to relationships. So about 75% of Americans are experiencing financial stress at least some of the time. This was actually before COVID numbers. I've been hesitant to update with COVID numbers because we are all stressed these days, and I have a feeling this would be 100%. And then 25% of Americans are feeling extreme financial stress. But that often impacts relationships and children. And if there are any economists here or economy theory buffs, the crab pot theory, if anyone's heard of the crab pot theory, with crabs, and if you do crab feeds as fundraisers and things like that, So with crabs, when you cook them, you throw them alive into the hot boiling water, and one of them tends to try to crawl up to the top and escape. And it's friends and family members who are down inside the boiling water pull it back down, basically to die with them in the hot boiling water, which does not make a crab feed sound very fun. I realize that, but that's where the theory comes from. And it's this idea that your family unintentionally and your friends, the people you hang out with, want to keep you on their level. And it's not a malicious intent, but it's what happens a lot of times with lower income families and poverty level families is once someone starts escaping, they'll try to pull you back into that. And so you'll often see this like generational wealth issues. And so children learn a lot of that from their parents. And I won't go on to a huge, soapbox there, but kids learn about money and finances from seeing their parents. And a lot of parents don't talk about it, about financial issues. They either will totally gloss over it altogether, or they may say things like, we have no money, we're never going to have money. And that kids internalize that. If they hear all the time that we're never going to have any money, that's kind of what they grow into. There have been lots of studies done of kids by the time they're 7 years old have how they think about money internalized basically for their life already. And it takes a lot of work to change that. So when I see relationship problems and I see kids involved, I do a lot of talking on how we can educate around some of these problems. And what I see in my office, the relationship problems I see, budgeting, the B word again, it never fails that the budgeter will marry a non-budgeter and then get frustrated because there's no budget involved or one won't follow it. But budgeting, financial habits, we all have different financial habits that we've, grown accustomed to. Either we went to college and we lived on our own, or we always lived with our parents or something like that. So there's these financial habits out there. And then I see the things like secret accounts and hiding spending from our spouses or significant others or whoever. And the way this often comes up in my office is one person will make an appointment with me to talk about their financial stress. And I'll say, okay, but we need to talk about this as a family. And I'll find out that I need to see bank statements and I'll need to see some documentation. They're like, for all of the accounts? And I'm like, yes, for all of the accounts. So there's often, I'm trying to get over that stigma, like they're hiding things from their spouses. And a lot of times that comes up because people didn't talk about money before they got married. They didn't talk about what they were going to do if one of them got sick, and they didn't talk about planning or anything like that because it's a scary topic. Talking about finances and death are probably the two things that people least want to talk about. So I see this a lot. I see a lot of spouses who have no idea what the financial situation is the first time they come see me. They have no idea that one spouse has $50,000 in credit card debt, or that they haven't paid their taxes in 4 or 5 years. So a lot of it is one, either being obtuse, like they just don't want to know and they've kind of stuck their head in the sand, or that was their lifestyle from when they were kids, so someone else always managed the money, so they never looked at it. So I do a lot of talking about this topic. I really encourage people who are considering getting married to have a financial session done to figure out what their finances look like, how their credit will be affected by marrying someone, and coming up with at least an open dialogue about finances. And finally, talking about the elephant in your health. And the elephant is that 70% of health issues are caused by stress, according to a study that was done by American Physicians Association in 2014. And they found that 76% of stress, the number one thing causing stress was money. So the topic of their press release that came out that year was, your finances are literally making you sick. And I honestly see this all the time. I see people who come in who have put off talking about their finances, and they have some chronic disease issues. They often have pain that they don't know how to fix. they've either gained weight or lost a lot of weight because of their, honestly, it's because of their financial issues. And I had a client, I've got a lot of stories in this area because a lot of my clients go through interesting things, and they keep in contact with me after we finish whatever we need to do. And so these are the stress responses that people often see as fatigue, headache, upset stomach, but a lot of that stuff covers up other bad things. They're symptoms, and they cover up things that you just think you're tired, and you just think that you're not handling something very well, you have a headache. But then we find out that they actually had some kind of disease that they were attributing to just stress. And the stress was probably making it way worse. So I had a client when I was first starting out, one of my very first clients. And she came to me and she had she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia, was what the doctor had told her. But as we know, that can be very nebulous. Like, people don't know exactly what that means sometimes, and you can't do much for it with fibromyalgia. And she came to see me, and her business was kind of in a disarray, and she was in foreclosure. And we actually did a Chapter 13 bankruptcy for her. We saved her business and we saved her house. And she came back to me years later, and she's like, I was in so much less pain once I solved my financial issues. She's like, I still have fibromyalgia. It doesn't go, it's not what it was. But she's like, I was in so much less pain because I wasn't stressed out about all these financial issues. And I was attributing that to my fibromyalgia when really it was the stress response to what I was going through. And I love to hear that. Those are my favorite stories, when I have someone come back and figure out that we did something that could help them, even though they may not have gotten rid of the underlying issue. At least we got rid of the financial problems causing more health issues. I had another lady a couple of years ago, and she's probably 4 years ago now. Time all runs together, especially in COVID land. But I had another lady who was 78 years old, and she came in, and we ended up having to do a bankruptcy for her. She had about $50,000 in credit card debt and medical bills that had just built up over the last 4 or 5 years because she couldn't work as much. And she came in, she was very stressed out. She was hunched over, and I see that a lot. I see people all hunched up. If you can see my video right now, I'm all hunched up. They come in like this. And she was very stressed out. And I told her, look, we can get rid of the medical bills. We can get rid of the credit cards. You can keep your house. You can continue working with what you're working with if you want to, or you could work off of Social Security. That's either of those things is fine, but you can keep your house because we have really good homestead exemptions in California. And she's like, really? I didn't think I could get rid of medical bills in bankruptcy. I was told you couldn't do that. And I was like, well, that's wrong. You can get rid of medical bills. So the next time I saw her, it was 30 days later, because we filed the bankruptcy. And then 30 days later, there's a meeting with the trustee that it's about 5 minutes long, and it's not really super stressful, but it's not stressful for me because I go through all the time, but it's stressful for the client because it's a one-time thing for them. And I saw her, and she looked 10 years younger. And I'm like, what is going on? And she said she had not slept in like the 30 days prior to meeting with me. But once she met with me, we filed this case and the collector stopped calling. She said she slept through the night every night for those 30 days from when we filed until her meeting with the trustee. She looked 10 years younger. And I still hear from her. Yeah, go ahead. Do I have a question?
It's Ron Schwab here.
Yeah.
That story rings a bell for me because, many of our members are struggling with disease. They have hospital bills coming out their ears. Mm-hmm. And, stress just further hurts them in terms of physically because of all the reasons you've talked about. What would you, if you put yourself in somebody's shoes like that, what would you advise them to do? Because that story you just told, to make them feel better, if they took proactive steps to relieve some of that stress and know what their rights really are, how would you advise them?
So that's why I do what I call strategy sessions, because most attorneys do like a free consult so you can get hired to represent them. My model is built more on giving people affordable advice one time if that's what they need. And so what I tell people is, first of all, if you have predators that are calling you and harassing you, you can tell them they're not allowed to call you anymore and they have to communicate in writing. So that's often the phone ringing is probably the number one stressor that I get from from clients. But then also knowing what your rights are can be a process. Start at the beginning though. If you're getting overcome by medical bills, you're getting overcome by credit card bills because you're trying to keep up with everything, I would talk to someone earlier rather than later. So bankruptcy may not be the only thing that we could do. We can come up with a plan. Sometimes we hold off doing like a final thing like bankruptcy because there are additional medical bills coming in, and we want to be able to make sure that treatment is done before we pull the trigger on something like that. So getting advice early on is what I would recommend, and not being afraid to ask what your rights are. Most accreditors, the hospitals are usually, they'll set up payment plans, but once it goes to collections, then it gets into kind of a crazy territory. So does somebody have a question? Am I interrupting someone? Okay. So working things out with creditors, putting things in forbearances and pauses is sometimes an intermediate step. And I usually advise on those rights as part of those sessions as well. So a lot of times it's people ignore it for so long that by the time they get to talking to someone like me, we are in crisis management. Whereas if they would have talked to me early on, we could have come up with, okay, this is what it looks like. This is what's exempt from your creditors from getting to you. A lot of people think they can't keep their houses, and creditors can, you know, get access to your house, equity and things like that. And that's not always true. I mean, it can be true, but it's very situational and specific to each situation. So
that was excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah. One other thing, you know, oftentimes people are hesitant to go to attorneys because they think of these huge bills and so forth. And in you describing your model as giving one-time advice or trying to give, you know, one upfront advice, I mean, I'm sure over the long run that pays for itself 100-fold. But can you give some sense of what those kinds of fees would feel like?
Yep, sure. So I charge $199 for a strategy session, which is usually about 45 minutes or so. So it's less than my hourly rate. Yeah, my hourly rate normally, if I'm going to be working in litigation or something like that, it's $400 an hour. But I do $199, and I'm pretty happy at that rate. Everyone's like, you should raise that because, you know, you've become more of an expert in this area. And I'm pretty happy with where I'm at. I think it's affordable for most people. And to be honest, if someone doesn't have $199, there's little chance that they're collectible. And what I mean by collectible is you have to have something to protect in order for someone to collect from you. If you're only getting Social Security and you don't have any assets, you're probably uncollectible is how it's called in the industry that I work in. And so it may not be something where you need to have legal advice. You just need to tell people to stop calling you because you have nothing. So I find that there's this break between people who have absolutely nothing, who don't really need legal advice. And then one step up from that is people who, if they had good legal advice at $199, they could save thousands of dollars and lots of stress. And then if after that $199 session, we need to go on and actually do a bankruptcy, then I work with them to figure out what we're trying to protect and how much that's going to cost. So none of my clients really feel like they can't afford the fees once we go through everything.
Wow, that's a no-brainer. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
And just to clarify, you do not need to be in debt to have a strategy session with you. That's the point of the strategy session, is to get
exactly
talking and counseling earlier on.
Yeah, and I joke sometimes that I'm more of a therapist talking through things, but a lot of what I do is taking what people have and pointing them towards the right legal direction and the right resources so that they have that support that they need to make the right decisions. Because a lot of the debt can be, what's the right word? Can be avoided if they had made good decisions. Like I see people sign up for ridiculous online loans at 500% interest and things like that. And I wish someone would have come to talk to me before they took on that debt or had something like that happen. So my solutions, which we've already started talking into, thank you, Ron, for the great segue into this. talk about it. I talk about a really hard topic and I try to make it seem like I'm fairly approachable. I think I am. My clients usually like to talk to me, but don't be afraid to talk about debt and credit and financials with people, with clients and that kind of thing. I know it's a taboo topic that people don't really want to talk about, but if you hear something, say something, I guess. And understand it's not all about financial literacy. I think most of my clients are fairly depressed by the idea that someone thinks they can just budget their way out of this. Because until you've actually lived through some of these situations, just talking about budgeting and saying, oh, well, you have $1 million in medical bills. That's great. If you pay $20 a month, that will go away someday. I'm like, no, don't talk about people budgeting their way out. There are all kinds of legal tools out there for dealing with this stuff, but people have to be willing to talk about the crisis side of it and not just the precursor literacy side of things. And I always tell people, if this speaks to you, because chances are I have people always on a Zoom or on a video that are like, she's talking about me. I hear she's talking about me. Get help. You don't have to talk to me, but just find out what your options are so that you can sleep at night. You don't wake up in the middle of the night with panic attacks and things like that. And if this doesn't speak to you because you have your vacation home in Tahoe and in Hawaii and wherever, I always tell people, help others. If someone says something and you're like, wait, that sounds like they're really, really having some problems with finances or understanding things, ask them in a non-judgmental way if you can help or if you can introduce them to someone who can help, because most people are scared of the judgment and having this personal information about them. And once you explain that you're not judging them for anything or doing it in a very open and honest way, then they are willing to talk about it. I have people who walk up to me at trade shows, honestly, and start telling me about their financial problems. So it must be some vibe I give off, because normally I would not expect that. But I've been to trade shows where someone, I have all this tax debt, can you help with that? And I'm like, okay, that's not usually how we open up conversations at trade shows, but okay. And then at the end, I do put run your business like a business on here, because I do have a lot of small business owners who don't have good disability insurance and they don't have good insurance if something happens to them, either medically or an accident. And a lot of them don't pay their taxes. I know that sounds odd that people don't pay taxes, but they don't. And so I tell people, run your business like a business, have your financials in order. If that's not your expertise, outsource it to someone who it is, so that you can have disability insurance and you can have the things that will help you if you do get sick and that kind of thing. So some resources. I'm getting some feedback here.
So sorry, if you're not on mute, if you could mute yourself, that would be helpful.
Let me try to, yeah, that's okay.
Good.
I can mute people because I'm host. So resources I have, I did write a white paper on financial stress, and it was based in the workforce, but it had a lot of these same details of productivity issues and health issues that are coming out of financial stress. And that is on my website. And then PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers they do an employee financial wellness survey every year. And I see this financial wellness word on here and I cringe. And it was really funny in 2018. So I linked to the survey, and it was really funny because they had like 80 pages of very cool infographics and really expensive marketing design. And it basically said employees want help with their finances, and their solution was to offer them financial advisors to help with budgeting and 401k. But the problems that were introduced in the survey are student loan issues and things that aren't investment and budgeting related. So it was a huge disconnect for me when I read that. I'm like, okay, you did all of this study to show that people are struggling with paying their credit cards and their student loans, and your solution is to give them investment advisors, because that makes sense. So it was kind of an ironic resource that I put in there. I appreciate that they did the survey, but then when I saw what their solution was a product they were selling, made it more difficult for me. Mm-hmm. And then that press release that I talked about, paying with our health, financial stress actually causes health issues, is linked on there as well. So that's me. I will turn this off and I'm happy to answer questions. I think I'm probably coming up on time.
Jen, that was
stop the share.
It was really nice to have this type of topic that no one
Thank you.
about. And If you have any questions for Jen, feel free to chat them or go off mute and ask them. We have for a few more minutes.
Yeah,
Don,
Yeah, just a quick question. Would you be, I'm involved with the Lafayette Senior Service Commission.
Mhm.
And we offer classes and that sort of thing in the community. Occasionally, we have had people do financial planning, occasionally, the wills and that kind of thing. But I think what you're talking about is really before that, and perhaps there's a much broader market. And I'm just wondering, would you be interested or willing to make this same presentation in that kind of a setting for
Sure.
people?
Yes, yep. I do a lot of
That's
this.
wonderful.
Yep.
Okay,
Happy to.
okay.
Again, I talk about this everywhere so that hopefully I can save one person from going through the stress of something they don't have to go through.
Do you find that the needs for seniors or people who are retired, who don't necessarily have any income other than whatever they have accumulated, are entirely different from the young worker?
It's interesting because I would say that most of my clients are 55 and older these days.
You would say?
Yes, most of my clients are 55 and older. And the reason for that is because a lot of them cashed out retirement accounts while they were still working to pay off credit card bills and to do things like that. And so now they are in
don't have anything.
retirement and they don't have anything. And they still have more credit card bills because they didn't change how they were operating their lives. Not that it's always a lifestyle issue, but something usually happens. But yeah, most of my clients are 55 and older.
Yeah. Well, it's incredible, the statistics that show what people have saved for retirement. And when I was actually working, I used to say, you've got a wonderful $100,000. What are you going to do after your nice vacation? Because that is not enough to get you through the next 20 years.
I do have a lot of people who come in and I ask about their retirement and they're like, oh, I have $100,000 in my 401k. I'm like, that's going to get you through maybe 2 years and not in the Bay Area, but what are you going to do after that? And I will say retirement accounts are exempt from creditors, most creditors. And so you can file bankruptcy with $1 million in your retirement account and keep your retirement account. And so people often don't realize that if they have these medical bills that have accumulated and things like that, I can protect retirement accounts and houses and all kinds of things to deal with the credit issues that are causing the actual stress. So,
do you do the kind of work that helps a person organize their assets so that they qualify for Medi-Cal?
No, I do not. You'd want to talk to Kirsten Howe, who I believe is
No,
on
I
your
know
board.
that.
Yeah,
I know that is a specialty area. But
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah, we exchange referrals a lot because she's often trying to help them with the Medi-Cal planning, and I'm trying to make sure that we can still qualify them for other things too. So yeah.
and Don, I can talk with you offline. I do have Kirsten Howe's contact information if you want that.
Okay.
Yep. She's excellent. Anything else?
I was going to say, Jen, as you were talking, I was thinking of my own life, obviously, personal and professionally, and I have 3 kids, and this is just a systematic educational issue. We're just not taught when we're younger how to manage money. So it's really up to either adults teaching you or commercials.
Exactly.
And unless there's some sort of earlier form of education, it's really easy to get in this. So bringing cancer support community and the people on this call into it. If you were to give like 3 quick tips or in a nutshell, what would you say if someone is stressed towards finances?
Well, the first thing is the tip is to actually get legitimate help. Don't watch commercials. Don't call the scam places really get people. And I do a whole presentation on scams that we may have scheduled for later this year. But the scam issue is people get stressed out and then they fall for things because they are so stressed. So my first tip is always make sure that the person you're talking to is legitimate. They're licensed wherever they should be licensed, that kind of thing. Because there are so many scams out there. The second one I bring up because you have 3 kids and student loans for seniors are one of my biggest issues. They co-signed or they took on Parent Plus loans for their kids who are now living in their basement at 40 years old. And no one can pay these student loans back. I would say never co-sign a student loan for anyone, your spouse, your kid, anyone, and don't take on these Parent Plus loans, because the problem with the student loan market, and again, a whole other topic, is that the cost of education went up so high because of the supply of funds coming into the system. And so my senior clients and my now ill clients are trying to deal with these student loans that weren't even their own student loans. So be careful who you co-sign for. That's another tip that I always have. If someone's in some kind of situation around you, get them help before, like when they say on the airline, fasten your own mask before you fasten somebody else's. If someone comes to you for help, make sure that your life support is on first before helping them with theirs. And then third is, there's so many things here, is just don't feel like you're alone. So that's the biggest thing too, is the stigma out there around this topic is just know that you're not alone. And if there is anyone in the world that's struggled with the exact same thing, I probably know 25,000 people that have done the exact same thing. And so just knowing that you're not alone can be somewhat self-assuring at some point, but yeah, you're just not alone.
Thank you. It's very helpful. So
Those topics.
yeah, while we finish up, if you have any more questions, a reminder to take yourself off mute or add it in the chat box, or I think everyone on this call has my email address, so please feel free to follow up too.
And I can put my email in chat too if anyone has questions.
That would be helpful. I also want to mention and put a plug in for our Cancer Support Community Legacy Advisory Council that Ron Schwab, who's on this call, he's also a board member, helped us to launch last year. So this group is a group, including Jen, of attorneys, fiduciaries, a CPA, licensed professionals in the area of finances who are really working with our community to help us to provide education like this, to provide some of them free consultations that are 30 minutes to an hour. So if you're experiencing anything in this realm or other realms, please reach out to me and I can happily connect you to one of our attorney friends in this advisory group. And unless there's any other questions, I think that's it, Jen, and really thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and letting me go on and on about my my soapbox topic. But again, thank you.
And Carlotta, we see your chat. Carlotta says, thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you indeed.
Jen, I'll start with you. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thank you.